Okay, I'll just be as brief as I can. On your proposal about sovereignty versus imperialism, actually some of my comrades here might be able to address that better, but I think what most historians would say is that the post-Versailles architecture of American imperialism, or global great power politics, however one wants to frame it. In other words, the U.S. support for self-determination under the sort of Westphalian, post-Westphalian nation-state system of sovereign, self-determined entities. This was not about the U.S. supporting self-determination of peoples around the world. It was about the U.S. trying to assert itself as the new empire in a form of imperial competition to replace the British and French empires. It was simply a question of the assertion of U.S. empire over previous empires. So I think that was a mechanism that was used as a wedge against British and French imperialism to assert U.S. hegemony in the world. I wouldn't attribute any subjective interest in self-determination to U.S. Global planners. The question about how would you, I mean, it was actually directed to Andy, I guess, but it was a very interesting question about if there's no, if there's no objective interest for the U.S. working class to support U.S. empire, why does it, right? It's a very good question, and I would simply suggest that the most interesting answer to that I've come across is in Anatole Lieven's book, America, Right or Wrong, an anatomy of American nationalism. And it's interesting that the concept of American nationalism on both the left and the right is a little bit of the missing center. The left tends to talk about U.S. imperialism and jingoism. The right tends to talk about patriotism. But the concept of nationalism, we think of nationalism as something that the more tribal, mono-ethnic nations of the world engage in, but not America. There is, I think the Iraq War, the post-9/11 political landscape of the United States demonstrated that there is a very palpable phenomenon that Anatole Lieven, I think, has a brilliant anatomization of, called American nationalism. And I would suggest that that would go a long way, if not all the way, in explaining why the American working class tends to support, although it doesn't monolithically support U.S. imperial policies.
They're going to kick us out at 9:30. So
okay, very quickly. On the question of Chomsky's position on international law and the United Nations, I am thoroughly with Chomsky on that. I think that I would say that international law as it currently exists, of course, you know, those of us on the left would like to see international law be a lot more bold in terms of dealing with global problems, but it isn't. Actually existing international law, I would say, is insufficient but necessary. I don't think we should trash it. On the contrary, I think we should support it and use it as the critique of U.S. unilateralism that it in fact is. It's not an accident that advocates of international law all over the world, particularly in Western Europe, used the arguments and the principles of international law to oppose the Iraq War and to oppose the Bush administration's unilateralism more generally.
Okay.
So I would say it's not enough, but it's important.